if I just start by quoting Jerry Brown, the Governor of California, on planning, he says the reason that everybody likes planning is that nobody has to do anything, which I think is one of the most profound statements on planning I've ever read. Can we start with David Cameron's announcement yesterday of the 20% discount to the usual price, or the affordable price, the market price? Now, I think it's a fairly open secret that the Help to Buy scheme has allowed house builders to game the system. They are putting up the prices of the houses by 10%, according to one company chairman I met, because they can, because they're getting subsidies from the government. Now, I think we've now got a vast expansion of a similar type of scheme now. And I just wanted to ask John, we may not know the answer to this because we're very early on in the process. Are you going to introduce in this 20% off thing any way of monitoring or valuing what the market price is, and to stop house builders doing what they've already done to the Help to Buy to this new scheme? Will you have spot checks, external valuers, anything like that?
I mean, obviously the scheme was announced yesterday. I mean, the coalition have agreed a certain number for 100,000 for the first year. The Conservatives will extend that. I mean, I certainly hope that they will. I mean, that seems to me gaming the system. That's not the right thing to be doing. The important point I want to make is that, this is a serious attempt to bring forward a volume of, significant volume of housing for people under the age of 40. We've set out the price limit of 250,000 and 450,000. A lot of work will need to be done to get that right, to avoid that practice that you've described. But what we do hope it will mean is that many young people will now realise that it is within grasp that they will be able to get on the housing ladder, which is about the core values of my party, which is about aspiration, home ownership and achieving independence.
It's just going to put the price of houses up though, isn't it?
Well, as I say, the policy was announced yesterday.
Yeah.
I think we will need to learn from previous experiences in other schemes. And obviously, I'll be able to take that back to the Minister when I see him later today.
Yes, well, ask him to, I can tell you who he ought to speak to in that case. Yeah. I think it's another one of not looking at the laws of unintended consequences again. I think there is a danger of this happening yet again. Laws of so
but
anyway,
we also need to be positive about the fact that there'll be thousands of young people in this country who will be able to get on the housing ladder.
Well, sure, and I mean, I'm sure that's the case.
But I mean, yes, I agree with you. It will need to be policed, it will need to be looked at, and I think that's only right and fair.
Emma, what about you?
We should help first-time buyers, but I think it's worth pointing out that this is the third time the government has announced this particular proposal, and yet we don't see any bricks being laid, even though David Cameron likes to lay bricks on this particular scheme. Nothing has gone up yet. There are several problems, and I don't think answers have been very forthcoming, not least from Grant Shapps on Sunday morning. The first is, how do you deliver the 20%? Because actually, although ministers on telly have been saying that on brownfield sites, developers are delivering 40% affordable housing, I'm sorry, but I haven't been to a brownfield site yet where developers are actually giving that much in affordable housing, because it costs a lot of money to decontaminate a brownfield site. The second is, who is going to build the roads on these sites if we don't have any community infrastructure levy? One of the reasons that people object to new housing developments is lack of infrastructure, and it's not just roads, it's other things as well. And thirdly, in my part of the country, nobody under the age of 40 who's buying a house for the first time is spending anywhere near 250 grand, frankly, because they're probably spending 120, 125 grand. So it's pretty meaningless in Wolverhampton and the West Midlands and many, many parts of the north. So yes, let's have help for first-time buyers, but let's have some answers as to how you are going to deliver this pie-in-the-sky 20% discount.
Well, what about
when
you,
somebody's
Emma?
got to pay for the roads, and frankly, Section 106 is not going to give you the savings that you need for that 20%.
Can I just come in and I think John's right. It's the limit's 250,000. You can get 20% off on a £100,000 house, presumably, can't you?
No, you said the limit outside London is 250,000 and the limit inside London is 450,000.
The lower limit.
Highest price of the property. It doesn't have to be that, and in many parts of the country it'll be significantly less. So you'll be able to have starter homes of 100, 125,000, which, as I understand it, can be bought in conjunction with a Help to Buy scheme, which will mean the amount of money an individual under the age of 40 has to provide is very modest, and therefore it's a realistic and immediate prospect of getting on the ladder.
And where does the 20% come from? How do you deliver the 20% discount? I'd love you to be able to do it, you know, and I'd rather you start doing it rather than keep talking about it, but I'm not sure that it is deliverable.
Well, what would you do, Emma? Come on.
We want to give local authorities the power to reserve a proportion, up to 50% of new homes on significant housing sites for first-time buyers in order to encourage developers to build new homes for first-time buyers.
OK. Can I just quickly, we've got some people from the... Yes, please. Make it brief, Steve.
Are you saying developments will be 50% affordable?
No, I'm saying that on significant sites, local authorities would have the power to give priority rights to first-time buyers. It wouldn't have to be 50%, it could be 40%. It depends on the area. It would just be at the discretion of the local authority. But that would enable local authorities to be in the driving seat and to encourage those sorts of starter homes to be built.
So the local authority would fund that, would they? I mean, it wouldn't be commercially fundable.
No, the local authority doesn't have to fund anything. It will be reserving a proportion of that site as a priority for first-time buyers. So it would encourage developers to be building for that market. Because the problem at the moment is we're not always getting the right type of houses in the right places. And in some cases, the developer has an incentive to build huge homes, whereas actually what we need is smaller family homes or starter homes. That is part of the problem. So we're saying that a local authority would have more power to determine, to drive the number of starter homes on significant housing sites.
But isn't there...
Emma, you'd agree that if you did that, the consequence would often be that the developer would say, this is simply not affordable, nothing gets built.
Well, to be honest, a lot of the viability stuff that I've seen, and again, we need to look at viability, because the developer is often saying, oh, we can't do this. Yet in Hammersmith and Fulham, when they change control of the council, suddenly the developers say, oh, actually, we can do this. It's just that you're playing hardball.
No.
Well, we'll see.
Some of us know Hammersmith and Fulham. That's not what's happened.
Steve, please. Right, OK. I think the only way, you always get back into planning and the system. I mean, everybody thinks that it can be improved and that we ought to do this and do that. I don't think many people have tried to change it. All have failed. I mean, I think that radical changes to the housing use class systems would sort everything out, because it would sort out the price of land in a trice. And I've written about it in Planning Magazine this week. And then I put at the bottom, and then I woke up. The
price of land is definitely a big part of the problem.
The
price of land is definitely a big part of the problem, and the huge uplift in value between not having planning permission and having planning permission, and the fact that a lot of that value is either going to the landowner and the developer. And in fact, on many occasions, it's going to the landowner, not the developer.
I'm just suggesting if you zone the land, it alters the price. That was all, really. Can we just talk a little bit about the housing association? We've got some in the audience now. And it seems to me that, you know, both governments have let housing associations drift into a sort of no man's land over the last 20 or 30 years. You know, their original ideas were terrific. They were, you know, organisations set up for the social good to provide cheap homes, you know, and I stayed in one when I rented one when I was a youngster. They're now turned into, you know, semi-private builders, forced to sell stock, have to JV up with the private sector to keep going. They have to buy the land at open market prices, which forces them to jack up the densities. And frankly, I've looked at the prices of affordable homes in London. Christ, you have to earn a lot of money to be able to rent or even half buy an affordable home in London. You have to be earning about 70 or 80,000 a year by the look of it. They don't build, housing associations don't build affordable houses anymore, do they?
Well, yes, they do. I think that the two of the most impressive projects I've seen recently in terms of increasing the housing stock of all the sorts that we've been talking about have been in East London and in Islington, where council estates have been knocked down, redeveloped. Housing associations have taken control. They've increased the density. There's been housing for rent. There's been housing to buy. And they've been able to fund the redevelopment through the housing to buy. And it seems to me that the larger housing associations are extremely innovative. And I was talking London and Quadrant, for example, raising £200 million on a bond, incidentally guaranteed by the government's housing infrastructure guarantee.
That's because the government won't give them any money anymore, that's why, isn't it?
Well, but they have raised the money and they're planning to use it to build housing for rent. This is exactly what we ought to be encouraging. And what they've started is something that I think has very, very great potential in the cities to increase the number of houses overall, maintain a large number of affordable houses, but also start dealing with providing housing for sale at rather lower prices in some cases than the purely commercial.
Yeah, all I'm saying is if you look at the rents they charge, you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked. Emma?
Well, one of the first things this government did within weeks of taking office was to cut the affordable homes budget by a huge 60% and to bring in the new notion of affordable, which is 80% of market rent, which in many parts of London is not very affordable for people, even on low or middle incomes. So there are some problems there. However, I do agree with Dick that the housing association sector, which is hugely important to housing more generally, has been very innovative in the way that it has dealt with this huge cut and is obviously doing homes for sale and for shared ownership to cross-subsidise their social housing as well. The result of making the housing associations more reliant on borrowing money on the markets is that you make them more pro-cyclical. So when we were in government and there was a global financial crash during the recession, actually housing associations, thankfully, were some of the people who are still building. If we had the current system in place, and we will have another recession at some stage, and we have another recession, I fear about what that will mean in terms of the numbers of homes that housing associations will be able to build. And they won't be able to keep just borrowing ad infinitum on the markets. However, we do support one of the things that the government's done, you'll be glad to hear, the guarantees that housing associations are now able to, it makes it cheaper for them to borrow. We do think that that is a good thing, and we do think that they should be extended.
Okay, we're just coming to the end of the sort of residential development bit now. We haven't talked about the private rented sector, which is the great white hope of mainly for people that work in that are members of Ian's organisation. So I just wanted to ask Ian finally on this part of the discussion about the PRS sector and what he thinks about it and whether he thinks anything more could be done. Should there be a separate use class, for instance, to lower the land prices in order to put up... The margins are really, really thin at the moment, and they are going into it, but they're only dipping their toes, and it's been 15 years of toe dipping. If you had a separate use class, lowered the value of the land slightly, the margins would become big enough for them to invest billions rather than the millions they're currently investing. What do you think, Ian?
I encouraged. I think that all of the political parties are very supportive of trying to encourage this institutional investment into the private rented sector.
It's coming in, isn't it, now?
It is, and Nick and the middle there and I both sat on the Montague Review. I think it must have been a world record for a government review that was implemented, I think, within about 2 weeks of the report being published, and delighted with that. I think a number of the things the government has done to support the sector have been very welcome. To get that money into the sector, what were you going to invest in? There wasn't that stock out there, so the build-to-rent fund has provided product. And then the changes to planning regulations, the suggestion that local authorities should use a covenant is very helpful in terms of...
Is any of them starting to put covenants rather than...
Yeah, it is happening. There are local authorities that are doing it, the likes of, I think, Newham at Canning Town, encouraged by the GLA.
And what are they putting on, 15 years before you can sell?
Yes, and that makes a big difference to the financial dynamics of the deal.
Much simpler than rezoning the land, then?
We did very much consider the use class issue, and at that point in time there was I think a concern in terms of the evolution of the sector that if you locked out the HPI that you would have done through that.
Locked out
the house price inflation that you would have done if you'd said that it had to be traded at its rental value then and its open market value, then that might have excluded some institutions from investing in this sector. Can
you say that again in
we went down
what do you mean?
We went down the covenant route because if we'd gone down the use class route, then the assets would have been traded on their rental value rather than would have locked out the sector from its open market value, sale value for those properties. And so
seems like a good thing, doesn't it? Why wasn't that
done? In terms of the growth of the sector, you want as many institutions as possible to see it as attractive. And at that point in time, and we had evidence, I think, from about 70, 80 people, including a number of institutions, and there was a mixed response to the use class.
Suggestion. Seems a bit self-defeating to me, that one, but there we go. Quick one, Emma, just let me get on to the resi.
Just to say that I've had that feedback as well, a very mixed response to this idea of a use class or zoning, in that some of the institutional investors that we've met with have said that they want to do mixed use schemes, so sometimes they might be building a commercial as well, and then building some build to rent on top of that. And if they had zoning, they wouldn't be able to do that. Although I take the point that you make at the outset, Peter, and Steve made, that actually one of the reasons that we're not seeing much of this happen, or as much as we would like, and I do think there is cross-party agreement on this, that we would like to lever more institutional investment in, is that in areas where it would work best, where there is high demand, the price of land is very high, and guess what? Actually, it's much more profitable to build to sell, and that is a big part of the problem.